Welcome to our latest session at LocalGov Drupal Week. Thanks so much for joining us. This session's entitled Creating an Accessible and User-Driven Experience Out of the Box, and it's hosted by Gemma and Shazia from Invuse. Thanks so much to both of you for running this session. We'd like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsor, Home Connections. Owned and led by local authorities and housing associations, Home Connections is a social purpose company supporting a fairer housing sector. So thanks to them. Thanks also to all our council and supplier subscribers, including Invuse, and our supporting partner Netcall, who've all contributed so much to the project. A little bit of Zoom help before we start. You can decide how to view the meeting in the top right-hand corner of your screen if you click on view. I know some people have struggled a little bit with that, so top right-hand corner. I'm now going to hand you over to Shazia, who will be running the session. Thank you very much, Shazia.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, everyone, for joining and coming today. We'll be talking about out-of-the-box LGD with accessibility and usability in mind. Just a few intros. So I'm Shazia, or Shaz. I've been at Invuse for the past year. Prior to that, I was a web content lead at a council, and I was responsible for the corporate website, introducing LGD to the council, and then lucky enough to go live and implement the site. Gemma?
Hi all, thanks for joining us today. I'm Gemma. I, like Shaz, have a council background, working in a digital team, managing a Drupal website, among other things. And I've worked with Invuse for coming up to 2 years now. As an LGD supplier, we've been lucky enough to work on and contribute to a variety of sites and projects. Some of the areas of our role, which will also form part of this talk today, are content design and strategy, user research and testing. So our mission statement on the screen at the moment, connecting organisation goals to their users' needs, and accessibility, which is something we're very, very passionate about, making sure all our digital services are inclusive and can be used by everyone. In today's session, Shaz will give you a brief intro into LGD and what it means to us. We'll talk a little bit about making accessibility and UX improvements, some of the functionality within LGD, backing this up with some of the research from a few of our projects we've worked on. And we could chat LGD for hours, but because of the time frame today, we're going to highlight some useful resources, but then also talk about common tasks, content types, guides, and step-by-step in particular components, and wrap up with hopefully some useful takeaways.
Perfect. So just to get started then, so as I mentioned previously, I discovered LGD when I was working for the council. I think it was around 2020, 2021, something like that. And at the time, I was advised by the directors and the council just to wait and just to see what happens, in inverted commas, waiting for the wheels to fall off. And that was just because it was a brand new idea, it was a brand new concept, but I had complete buy-in. I loved it. I could see the relevance, I could see the concept, especially the ethos of by the councils, for the councils, that really resonated quite hugely for me, especially because at that time, I was really invested in the approach of our users' needs and making sure that they could simply and easily complete a goal or task. So I was very passionate about LGD from the start, kind of referred to as the LGD queen, if you will. And that was just because I was always consistently talking about and referring to Will and Mark. So Gemma, just to get started then, what is it that you take into consideration when starting an LGD project?
So these 4 areas stand out to me as a great focus point for an LGD project: joining the community, subscribe to the mailing list, get involved in the meetings on Slack and GitHub. These things can be a bit daunting at first, but just being involved really, really helps, and it will build your confidence there as well. start talking to users and colleagues from the very, very beginning. This can really help with internal buy-in with your stakeholders and, you know, your leadership, chief exec, and to gather users for ongoing feedback and testing. And that W3C accessibility, familiarizing yourself with the WCAG guidelines and what you're legally required to do. But more than that, it's thinking accessibility from the start. And that will help you easily spot areas that need work and visualize how to make improvements as well. And finally, the gov.uk design system, GDS, a set of styles, components and patterns that guide the government to be consistent in their digital online services. It helps with efficiency, avoiding duplication, being consistent. It's open to anyone to reference and use. So yeah, we've added a couple of useful links here. So number one, will take you to the gov.uk design system that I just mentioned, where you can find the A to Z style guide as well. This will really help with content writing. I'd recommend organisations create their own systems and style guidance as well. So start putting it together from the beginning of a project if you can. This will really help to keep your team working consistently and for that ongoing management. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. A couple of really good examples out there already, such as Brighton and Hove content style guide, and then Croydon Patterns.
Okay, so just referring to Croydon Patterns then, just want to show what that looks like. As Gemma mentioned, there's lots of examples out there. This tends to be our go-to just because they started off with that. But Gemma, you also did some work on patterns, right?
Yeah, I really enjoyed working with the content team at Haringey and their senior content designer at the time, Ben Hills-Jones. I'm sure some of you have heard that name in the LGD circuit. That style guide and patterns was a focus from the beginning of the project, making style and content decisions as a team, and then looking to Gov for best practice as well. It includes things like structure guidance, headings, summaries, best practice, where to put call to actions, how to label them, when to use call outs and alerts. All this functionality is out of the box in LGD. Using a link or button and how you write your link and button, that sort of thing. If you're recording that as well, it's going to help you keep that consistency. And yeah, it's really highly recommended from me.
No, I agree. So I'm going to stop sharing the slides. That's really interesting what you mentioned anyway. I just want to look at some LGD examples and just have a chat around out of the box in comparison to some functionality and features that have been updated or tweaked.
Just to add in a little
examples.
Sorry, I was just going to say, just to add in a little caveat here, I suppose we should, we're not attempting to solve and cover everything today. We just wanted to share some recurring things that we found, and also wanted to give you a heads up that we might mention your council or something, you know, like we have with Croydon Patterns here. We didn't work on this project, but we just want to highlight some really great examples out there and things to look out for, basically. So, yeah.
Okay. So thanks for that caveat. I think it was needed. Gemma, just keep an eye on the time, because you know what I'm like. I would have had a timer put up really, but I think that's going overreaching there. So on patterns, I wanted to touch on common tasks, especially out of the box for LGD, and some further dev that councils have kind of done with their particular websites. So this is out of the box. With LGD, you have your common tasks available here. Now, when we refer to the common task or your top task buttons, as it's also known as, they're normally found on landing pages or service pages. And to us, it just means that you can bring those common tasks out of your IA structure just to make it simpler and easier for your users to access. It's taking it out of that content. Westminster have got a few examples where they have slightly changed it in comparison to out of the box. And a lot of councils I've noticed have changed designs on these. So I know, Gemma, you've done a bit of work with Haringey on common tasks, and you found some user research just highlighting why these need kind of tweaking and amending. So don't know if you want to share those findings.
Yeah, so we did quite a bit of feedback gathering from users in alpha before it went live initially. And actually, I will sort of say that the Haringey site isn't completely live at the moment. So if you do go and check it, there are certain sections that are the LGD site, and then certain sections that are still the old site. So initially, the research and feedback showed that users weren't seeing common tasks as buttons, and some reported seeing the kind of common tasks as headings to the content below on the landing page here. So we worked collaboratively with the design and development team at Anatech to iterate based on the research we did, basically. Similar to what Westminster have done here, actually, Haringey have gone for that 4-button layout over 3 columns, just to remove that continuation element. And Luke, their UI designer, did some additional work to style the buttons, again, like they've done here. So it just makes them pop out. It kind of differentiates them from the information below. We can continue to gather further feedback, actually, from the new designs. So testing again in beta. We did some click testing, which was really, really valuable, and some website testing with users. And we were able then to validate our research and basically be sure that users were interacting with the task buttons as we wanted them to, as you know, which they were, which was great. And other factors to take into account here, I'll just mention while we're on it, is just making sure they're informed by data. So using that active language as well: pay your council tax, book a tennis court, find your councillor. We wanted them to lead to actions and essentially be a shortcut, you know, taking, like you mentioned, Shaz, taking them out of the IA structure, those common key user journeys. And I'd also say, if you're making any design changes, just make sure it meets WCAG, WCAG compliance for color contrast. There's lots of lovely free tools out there that anyone can use. Digital Alley and Silktide both have a free checker, I think.
Yeah, no, they do. Cool, that's some great tips there. I am going to move on to content types, guys, to start with, just because we can talk about common tasks forever. So again, just to highlight out of the box guides. So if you can see here, we've got this content guide box where we have the links available going across horizontally with some bullet lists here. Now, the only issue that I found with this with users is that the layout can be affected, especially if the link text themselves are quite long. It tends to cause a bit of issue where it displays as if the links sit on top of each other, which isn't a great user experience. Now, I know that some councils have opted to change that layout to a vertical layout. I know you've done some work with Haringey, so I'm just going to refer to Haringey here. And you found a bit of research on this as well. You did some work on this, right?
Yeah, again, all based on user research, so feedback gathering again and testing in alpha and beta. Users reported that the guide layout out of the box was a little bit confusing. They often didn't see the content as related, and they didn't see them as separate service pages either. That horizontal layout out of the box, it doesn't necessarily show a clear logical order. I know it's not a step-by-step, but you know, you do tend to lean start overview, and then you kind of want to go in some sort of order.
You expect it to be in order, don't you? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And they didn't necessarily understand either that, you know, you could tab between the bullets at the top, or you've got those previous and next buttons, and that those were actually related. I know you can skip ahead with the bullets at the top, but yeah, again, we did a lot of research here. We factored in some changes, a collaborative thing again with the Haringey team and then Anatech, and all guided by our research. And essentially we looked quite heavily at gov.uk here for some guidance as well. And I talked about at the start about knowing your WCAG guidelines. I just add here, it's key to test this functionality to improve that experience and just to make sure it's accessible. Yeah, I know you do a lot of testing, Shaz, at Invuse. What are the things to be aware of with guides?
Yeah, so when I've done sort of my accessibility audits, found a couple of things that I think is important just to mention here. So when we talk about functionality, we need to be thinking about users who use assistive technology, users that are using keyboard navigation. So any of our new listeners here, that just means tabbing using your keyboard and not using a mouse. So at the moment, you currently tab through all the links, and then you get to the content. So I'm just gonna demonstrate that here. So I go through the guide links. I get to the next page, and then I'm back to the start of the page. And this isn't anything to do with Haringey as such. It's just the way it's working in terms of guides that I just wanted to highlight. I'm back now to that guide list, if you can see that bold underline. And so as I'm tabbing, or if I was to use a screen reader, I would then have to listen to all those links or options before actually getting to this second page. So me and another colleague at Invuse, who's our lead user researcher, we were just wondering why we shouldn't include a skip to content link here as well. So you normally find that at the top of a web page. We were considering, could this work for a guide? And so I was looking at gov.uk. I'm always referring to gov.uk. They are essentially always iterating and looking at their pages anyway. And I recently found, I can't quote you on when it was that I noticed this, but so you've got your skip to main content. I am tabbing through, so I'm using my keyboard here, not my mouse. So you've got your skip to main content at the top of that page, but then they've introduced this skip to contents of guide. And this is exactly what I'm referring to in terms of we need to try and not duplicate having to hear all those links in that content guide box if a user doesn't want to. They just want to get to that next page. So again, I'm just quickly going to demo that. So for the first time, I'll go through all the links on this page. I'll get to their next button here. I'm just going to be careful because they've got so much links on this page. I don't want to lose where I am. So I'm on the next page. I'm on eligibility. I know that I want to listen to eligibility. I can then click on skip to contents of guide and it'll bring me down. I am avoiding and skipping all those links. So essentially that is what I'm talking about. Just considering using that for our guide pages from an accessibility point of view.
We were just saying earlier, weren't we, about the language there isn't necessarily right, because they've said skip to main contents of guide, but then the menu is actually called contents. So really what they need to say is skip to the main page or something. Yeah.
Something along them lines.
Yeah.
I found that confusing. I read that at first and thought, don't know what that means. So yeah, just to consider your link text. I mean, that's what we always say anyway in terms of content design. And whilst I am on guide, I also just wanted to mention the previous and next buttons. So out of the box, we just have previous or next. Just spend that time adding your link text, putting through what the next page is actually called, that page title. That will help immensely as well with screen readers, just to know where they're going next as well. Okay, I think that is enough on guides, unless there's anything you want to mention, if I've forgotten or not mentioned here.
No, not at this stage. Yeah.
Again, I'll go on about this all day, but
yeah.
I don't have all day. I only have a few more minutes. So I will then move on to step by step. Now just bear with me on this one, just because I find this quite a big content type that we need to look at in terms of tweaking, slightly adjusting. I love step by steps. I think they are great. I'm just going to go on to an example here. What I would suggest is considering what is a step by step versus a guide, first of all. This was a big bugbear of mine when I was working at the council, trying to explain what constitutes a step by step and what suits a guide page. And personally, I just think it needs to be that clear process. It needs to have an action at the end of it. It needs to be short and sweet, minimal if possible, or minimal content anyway, just so that it's easy to follow and it's a simple user journey. And that's the whole point of all of these content types, just something simple and easy. So we just need to be mindful that we're using it in the correct way. And one of the examples I tend to use, loads of examples, I keep saying that, but is the taxi process. So I know some councils don't have taxi licensing, some do, but there are so many intricate processes in applying for a taxi license. So for example, you have a DBS check. Once you get that through, then you can go for a knowledge test. After that, once you've done that, go for a medical certificate. You can only do that once you've passed your knowledge test, because you've got to pay for this medical certificate with your GP. After that, you apply for a license, and then there's more intricate processes within that. This is where a step-by-step would work. However, I just want to put a caveat there. I am not in any way advising to use a huge step-by-step for this. Break the processes down. But
for something like that, it almost needs to be a kind of tick box process, doesn't it? And it makes me think of when I used to have to do my self-assessment tax return, you know, HMRC website, that really, really long list of stuff that you can check. I've done that, I'm going on to the next thing, and you can go away from it, you can go back to it. And I think Gov have done something sort of similar, but
no, exactly. It's that idea of knowing, right, that's step one. I'm going to walk away, go do what I need to, gather whatever documents I want. Right, tick, that's done. Coming back, right, I've done step one, what's step two? Going through step two, going away, coming back, whatever that might be, whether that's an online form, whether that's getting your documents together, whether that's going external, whatever that might be. It's knowing, right, tick one, tick two, done. So just with that caveat then, just to highlight there that I just find step-by-step is not suited for everything. I think looking at a council service as a whole, there are probably just a few examples where I think it's best used and best suited. But ignoring that, as long as it meets that user journey and the needs of the user. So put yourself in that user journey's place and think, as a user, does this work as a step-by-step? Or do I need to consider a guide or even service pages within a sub-service landing page? So I know you're looking at me, Gemma, because I'm going on a bit. So I'm going to quickly try and get to the point. So this is an example. Again, please don't worry about what example we're looking at. We're just finding that registrars tends to be that go-to, that registering a birth, registering a death, that tends to be the go-to for a step-by-step, which I completely agree with. I think it does work. I just think that there's quite a bit of information within each step-by-step. So if I just look at book an appointment, there's quite a few things I need to know within that. I would question as a user, do I need to know this as a step-by-step within that process of what I need to do? Information you need to provide as well. That tends to be quite heavy. I mean, this content is lovely, really. It's tried to break it down here. But my point here is, I think with registrars, we work so closely with the stakeholders, so with the registrars themselves, because they are quite careful and sensitive about their content, and because quite a lot of it is legal requirement, I think they find that everything needs to be added in that one place. And as content designers with user research, I just think we need to consider, does it have to be all added in this one section, in this one place? Just because it can be quite overwhelming for users. So just as an example from a user's point of view, if I need to register a birth, so I've not got any children, ignore the fact that I've worked with the registrar section and I know this like the back of my hand, but if I wanted to register birth, what is it that I want to know? Well, I just want to know who can register that birth. If I'm unavailable, can someone else come on my behalf? How to book that appointment? Is it online? Do I need to call up? What do I need to bring to that appointment? So red book, ID, things like that. What's going to happen at that appointment? What can I expect? And then anything additional, I think, could be either using another page or just splitting up that content. And I will come to an example of how we can do that. I just want to highlight a few other out-of-the-box functions and features. We have the show and hide summaries. So that's available out of the box. And I just find that with this particular function, users are now starting to come back to say, we find this a bit disorientating. They find that when they actually start off in the step-by-step and they show the summaries, quite a number of users have said, well, I thought this was it. I thought this summary was it. Didn't think I could click on the link title or the page title and it takes me to further content. They thought this was the step-by-step and that's all they need to do, these one-liners. So I'm going to quickly compare it to gov.uk. Just bear with me because I think that goes to a page there. So this is their step-by-step. And as soon as you look at it, you realize that the show and hide summaries have gone. They don't use it anymore. So they've iterated it pretty soon. I mean, I don't know how long it's been, but it's been here for a while. They now have show and hide steps instead of that one-liner summary. And this is where it comes to fruition when I mention about splitting that content within each area. So what these links here do is split the content within this step itself. And if your link texts are front-loaded and they are quite obvious, your user will be able to see what is relevant to them and what information works for them. So for example, check what age you can drive. It's a form, fine. I don't need to know that. I know it's whatever age, 17. What are my requirements? So you're splitting that content down. So in that example for registrars, I would have had, you know, what do I need at that appointment? And then when you need translation and information you need to bring, this can be split within these 3 sections here rather than trying to put it all in one page in that one step. This is something that you're probably going to have to look at in more detail. It's not something I can quickly go through now without it sounding quite confusing. But just notice that the title of these steps are also not links. When you open that title up, it opens that summary headings within that section. It doesn't go directly to the content, which I think is great as well. One last thing I want to mention here is if you can see this part of. Now, out of the box, we tend to have our breadcrumbs at the top that would normally say learn to drive or birth registration. You then have this part of section here, and then you have this part of section for the 3rd time. So all I want to highlight is when you're testing this with a screen reader, they are reading this title out 3 times already. And it's just some food for thought to think about removing this additional duplication of links because it will be picked up whether you use Wave or AxDev. You're nodding quite generously there, Gemma. So I'm going to go quiet. And if there's anything you want to add about step by step.
No, you covered it really nicely. I think just going over the reasons for choosing, so really honing on that content and why you're choosing it in the first place is key. And in most cases, in my opinion, you can't be an accessible, well-structured service page. So with that action call to action right at the top of the page for that simple user experience, and for accessibility, kind of simplicity as well. A good example, if you don't mind bringing this up, is the discretionary housing payments page. I wrote this recently. So in the team, I was questioned why I hadn't used a guide or a step-by-step actually. My reasoning was that it isn't a process that has to be done in order. So it didn't need to be a step-by-step in my opinion. And splitting that content really clearly in those subheadings, but having your call to action at the top just really works here. I think you've got basically that start now button leads off to a third-party site anyway, so you don't really want to delay users there if they just want to get to that portal. But then you've got that content underneath, neatly laid out, plain language, really accessible for those that are going to spend a bit longer looking for the information they need about whether they can apply, basically.
Okay.
But yeah.
No, I love that. And I've noticed that with quite a few of your projects, you always have your call to actions at the top, and then your subheadings at the bottom is really precise, quite focused, and you can see that pattern throughout the site. So I love the content design work that you do there. I just want to quickly mention this call out that you've got here. I know you mentioned it when we're talking about patterns and such. I've noticed with your content design work, you actually use this call out where it's needed, where it's relevant, not necessarily at the top of the page. You use it sort of within sections. I don't know if you just want to give us a bit of information from a content designer point of view on that.
Yeah, so again, collaborative thing with the team at Haringey, with Ben. It comes back to that internal design system that's put in place. So utilizing that call out functionality out of the box and adding guidance around it for the team. You know, you'd use the red call outs for urgency, that immediate action required, and then in this case a sort of softer call out for a time frame that you don't want somebody to miss, essentially, if they want to disagree with the decision. They need to do it within a month, basically.
Yeah, no, I like the consistency throughout the site. I think that's most important. And like I said, it's mentioned where relevant. It doesn't have to necessarily be at that top of that page. I just also wanted to mention with your Haringey work, your contact components. It's different slightly from out of the box, and you've also placed it differently as well. So I don't know if you want to just give a bit of analysis on the user research that you did and why you've done it that way.
Yeah, again, lots of iterations to this component, a collaborative thing. Anatech worked on this, Invuse, Haringey team. When we talked to residents at the start of the project, and we did that user research, they told us that they couldn't find relevant contact information. That was one of the biggest frustrations that came up. They often couldn't get through to customer service centre, and when they did, they were given different numbers or they had to be redirected. It's a huge, you know, borough, huge council. A globally signposted central contact number wasn't going to work, and it was felt a page containing various details didn't offer that sort of good UX. So contact details placed on individual pages relating to the topic, to the specific topic was the answer here. And it helped to have leadership buy-in for this, essential, that, you know, chief exec buy-in, so that it goes back to that starting point of engaging everyone at the start of the project. And it meant that we could shake up teams and say, look, we need your contact details. It's been agreed that this is how we're going.
Much needed. I just wanted to compare it quickly with out of the box, because that's what we've been doing throughout this talk. So you have that out of the box contact component. This tends to be sort of on the landing page here. The only thing I'll mention here, because I'm going to hand over to you for a minute, is just that when providing an email address, just from an accessibility and usability point of view, please try and avoid send us a message link. Provide that full email address rather than just a link here, only because not a lot of users will have it connected up to their mailbox. Some users might just want to make a note of that email address and come back to it later. So I just wanted to highlight that quick one on there. But yeah, do you want to just talk about comparisons?
Yeah, obviously in this example, it's added to the landing page at the bottom there, and we've worked with other customers where we have done that as well. But tends to work for much smaller councils. So, you know, looking at elections and voting, you've usually got a really clear elections team, and you can send them through to the team there, which works. But it just didn't make sense in the case of the Haringey project. And I mean, in registrars alone, there are various different contact details, the registry office, the coroner, etc. And all with different opening hours, opening times, numbers and locations. But yeah, one final thing to mention here is the decision in-house, like their style, the basically including the location there, and yeah, basically just
having it in that one place,
having
right?
it in
the site.
Yeah, at the bottom there, and not dispersing contact information within the text, we found was a good direction, because, you know, you're then relying on users to sift through and try and hunt out those numbers they need.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think everything we've mentioned, it is based on your own councils, what they prefer, not prefer. So I know with the council I worked at, it was a big no-no. We don't want numbers plastered all over. We want to decrease the amount of contact. My only opinion on that is, yes, you might have digital transformation within your council. However, you can't exclude, you can't take away those contact numbers. So it is looking at what is required or needed for your particular council. But if you are going to have this, have it in one place. I like the avoidance of having numbers and email addresses in the content, because like you said, you have to sift through. Email addresses will just add more links to tab through, so just consider that. But in regards to this from an accessibility point of view, it does meet WCAG 2.2 consistent help, because it does state users should be able to find that help in one place. Now, I know it doesn't refer to tooltips or help guides, but this in a way is a helping tool for a user. So if they know where to find it consistently throughout the site in one particular space, you're kind of meeting that requirement there as well.
And it's logical, right? Because if you're coming to a page, hopefully you've managed to help those that can self-serve. You know, you've got your call to action at the top if they need a form, whatever. If they can't, then they've worked their way and they've got those contact details. So it made sense.
And you're more likely to scroll down on a service page, whereas on a landing page, you see your 6 blocks maybe, or however many you've got, you might not scroll down to get to the contact box on the landing page. So I do prefer on the service. But again, it depends on each council. This is just some helping guidance, really, and tips. I am just going to go back to our slide. We're coming up to the end. I know it's 5:30 now. Just some useful takeaways. So just a bit of a recap.
Just to recap, let your data inform your choices. For me, it's always a vital starting point, but it shouldn't be used on its own. Connecting with your users, listening and feeding back. So, you know, showing that you've listened will build that trust and that ongoing relationship with your users. They'll be more inclined then to put themselves up for more testing in the future or what have you. And considering accessibility, can't express this enough. Everything you do, does your page, component, guide, does it work well for absolutely everybody?
Okay. For me, some useful takeaways is just testing. Always test your platform with different browsers, mobile devices, zoom text, that resize and reflow. Keyboard navigation is a main one, so tabbing through, not using a mouse, and loads more. But test. Join the community. Cannot stress this enough. Join the Slack community, join the GitHub, share your findings, bring any issues that you might be facing, and speaking to peers in the community. This is something that I need to work on. I have no confidence in going to GitHub and putting some technology on there. You don't need it. You just need to go on there and add any issues that you found. It's such a great friendly community, and then keep evolving. So my only takeaway, I think, from all of this is continuously iterating your LGD site, so as not to fall back into that 3 or 5 year, we need a redesign or a recycling sort of issue. This isn't that. As long as you've got your continuous user research, you've got your feedback, you've got your constant conversations with your users via customer panels, via user research groups, you need to constantly iterate the navigation, your content, go into Slack, see what the community are building in terms of features and functionality. And then for me, it's LGD should be or is the solution. It's not a short-term fix. As long as your site is organic and you're continuously improving it, you should never have to then go and do however much grand of redesign or a brand new look. You just don't need to. I'm going to go quiet because you're looking at me. That's the end.
10 minutes for questions was wishful thinking. We've got about 5
I just
now.
want to thank everyone on the chat, really. I know people are putting links up for us and things like that. So I just want to shout out to everyone who's done that.
And always free to talk about anything after this as well. Shaz, I think if you move on to the next slide and leave it on that, you can contact us here as well.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, guys. There were some questions in the chat, so I'm gonna read out a couple and we'll see how far we get. So the first one's from Nova from Luton Council. Do you ever find that having the CTA at the top stops people from reading what they need to do before they attempt the application? And does it matter if they're going off to an external site? I guess that's you, Gemma.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I have trawled through hours and hours of actually watching live usage of, you know, with Hotjar or whatever it is, of people using desktops, mobiles. That functionality is really good, and I'd really recommend Hotjar if you haven't got it. And the thing is, you're not going to change how a user behaves. So in answer to that, I would say what you're doing with that call to action at the top is you're providing those users that are never going to sift through all of that information with that quick, easy user journey. And then those that are, they can see that underneath and they can see instantly, you know, I start with who can apply, and then I start with what you need. As long as it's really, really clear also really accessible as well. I just think you're not forcing people to have to read stuff before they click through. So that would be my answer there. I don't know if you've got anything to add, Chaz.
Yeah, just a quick one. Users are going to go and look for that big button. Even if you've got it right at the bottom of the page, they're just going to scroll down and just find that big button. What I normally find with external portals and sites, and I'm going to finish on this, Tim, I promise, is that normally you have that kind of information as part of your online form anyway. So it's not duplicating that information, and it's just helping that user journey. They're going to look for that button regardless.
Brilliant, thanks guys. I hope that answers your question, Nova. Oh yeah, thanks for the answer. Nova's put in the comments, that's brilliant. Another question from Nova: do you open the external site in the same tab or a different one, which would make it easier for people to come back to the guidance?
Do you want me on that one, Gemma?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
My only thing is, it doesn't matter if it's on the same or a new window or tab. What I will want people to consider is start writing with your link text opens in a new window or tab. As long as you're letting your user know that they're going to go to a new window or tab, it's fine. Normally, users do expect them to move on in that same tab. I hope I'm not confusing this. But GDS best practice just suggests if you do need to open, and if it's an external, I'd say open in a new window or tab. Just let your users know. Just, in brackets, opens in a new window or tab. Gemma, I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, just to tag on, another way of just making that clear, but without those additional kind of add-ons at the end, is you can just say, find universal credit page on gov.uk website. That way you're telling them it's another website, it's not this one. You don't then need, so it's either or really, just as long as you're telling your user where they're going. That's the essential thing. As a general rule, I tend to, if I'm sticking to a page that goes on the same site, I tend to keep it, just move off to that page. If I'm going to an external site, I tend to put, pop up a new window basically, or new tab.
Brilliant, thanks guys. Next question, also from Nova. Other people have asked them, but it makes sense to go through these ones first, I think. We're told to avoid providing telephone numbers to encourage digital contact methods because it's cheaper. How did you encourage the councils you work with to agree to using phone numbers?
Just relating to the Haringey example I used there, they're really forward-thinking council. They've got buy-in from the top. The chief exec wants to help the residents. I'm not saying that, I just think there's this constant struggle with, going back a few years ago, it was like everyone was on a sort of rampage to try and hide all numbers. We must be digital first. But it doesn't work that way, and there are people that can't self-serve. The diversity in Haringey meant that a lot of people didn't speak English, and there were these needs that we had to take into account. Like I say, can't stress enough that there just is that buy-in, and that was really key. And then when you've got that buy-in from the top, you can then tell teams and services, actually this is what we're doing. Basically, it's been decided at the top. You can't go against it, kind of thing. But yeah, it is a really, really tricky one. I would just advise you don't try and hide anything. That transparency. We've worked with some really, really remote councils in Devon, which is actually where I'm from, but that doesn't add to this in any way. But essentially, those local councils, they still go down to the council in person, and you can't change that. Unless you change generations and move forward, you can't stop these people doing that. So you need that information there. Sorry, waffle.
No, it's fine. One last question before we've got to call time. We're actually at time, but there's one more question that's from Nini Lynn. Is there any testing around where the task buttons are necessary?
Oh, I see. Just deciding whether you need them or not.
Yeah.
I think that means, yeah. We haven't done any personally. We were always going to use them. I think one of the really key things to pick out here is that data. So honing on Haringey again, but that sports and leisure section, we found out the most key piece of information, or one of the most visited areas, key user journeys, was actually booking a tennis court. So it just, the user need there to bring that out of, stop people having to go into that IA and just bring that right out, just simplified it. But I haven't done any testing personally. I don't know about you, Shaz, where you've restricted that.
No, I think for me is each service area will have those top tasks that users do. So follow the data. If you've got a 3-column, sort of 3 buttons there, if you have 2, there is nothing wrong in having space on there. Don't force yourself to fill out 3 just because it might look pretty, or your OCD is kicking in, or it needs to look symmetrical. If there is only in that phase, in that 3 or 6 month phase, that these 2 top tasks are the main data analytics where users are going, then it's 2. Maybe the latter of those 6 months, it might change because the phase changes, something else pops up. Just follow the data and follow your user needs. It's all about your user needs.
Okay, thanks. There's a couple of answers to that in the chat as well. One from Alex Ferrand. He said, we found that that people we tested skimmed over top tasks and straight to the stuff below, with some seeing top tasks as a heading, as you found. And Caroline McCabe said, yes, at Essex, we also changed the guide links from horizontal to vertical. There were accessibility issues for users with screen magnifiers in scrolling horizontally. And so thanks everyone for your comments and for the link posting. Maria's posted some links to GitHub if people want to go and check those out in the chat as well. So we've come to the end. Thanks, Shazia and Gemma. That was really interesting. It went really well. We were worried at the start, weren't we, about it running smoothly, but that ran brilliantly smoothly. So well done, guys. And thanks for all your kind words about LocalGov Drupal at the start as well. It's really great. Thanks to everyone for coming.
Sorry, I was just going to mention, Tim, if anyone wants to carry on the conversation, find us on Slack. We can put a little group meeting together if anyone wants to go into detail. It's all about Slack.
Brilliant. And Aaron has posted his email address in the chat so that if you want to join our Slack community, ping him an email and he'll be able to add you. Please give us any feedback on this session by responding to the email that you receive after the session. That's the other thing to say. Thanks again to our sponsor, Home Connections. There's lots going on this week, so please do register for future events on our Luma page, and you can also find the link to Luma in our chat because I'm about to post it in there. There we go. And that's it from us. So hopefully we'll see you again later in the week. Thanks again to Gemma and Shazia, and yeah, see you all soon. Thanks very much. Bye bye.
Cheers. Thanks all.